Good afternoon, everyone. This is Mike O'Malley here with the Hurricane Season 2020 update, part of the Hurricane Outlook and discussion for July 20th, 2020, recorded around 2:24 p.m. Eastern Time. We're taking a look here at the latest sea surface temperature anomalies as updated as of yesterday. Not much has noticeably changed. We're continuing to see this area of persistent cooling out here in the equatorial Pacific, mainly in the Nino 3.4 region, which is a particular interest to us because this basically dictates our ENSO conditions, either El Nino or La Nina. Right now, we are in neither. We are in what's called a cool neutral state, but this will likely head towards a La Nina by the time we get into fall and winter of this year. And I noticed that there is some warming out here in the Nino 1 and 2 regions, and this will kind of roughly correlate to warming up some of these areas over the next several days over the Nino 3.4, but this area averaged is still roughly about 1 to 2 Celsius below average in some cases. Most averaged out about 0.3 to 0.4 Celsius below the long-term average. And in the Atlantic Basin, we continue to notice this very persistent area of warming near the Canary Islands all the way down to the Cabo Verde Islands, which is located right here. The Canary Islands are right here. And this is going to continue to warm over the next several weeks or so. Again, we are heading closer and closer to July. And this is really going to matter here. And if we take a look at this in a different format, this is coming from cyclonicwx.com. This is the OSET version, just a different methodology of calculating these sea surface temperature anomalies. But you notice these anomalies in through here, are almost about a full degree Celsius above average, in an averaged, area, but some of these are approaching 1/2 degree Celsius above the long-term average. This area is literally on fire, and it's actually put us ahead of 2010 and 2017 in some retrospect. And again, this is now where things start to matter, where we have things starting to ramp up. And if you stay tuned here for just a minute, we'll get into what's really occurring out there. But now where things are really starting to ramp up, these sea surface temperature anomalies now become really relevant. They become a very relevant piece of our information that we have for forecasting tropical cyclones. And when we have stuff developing or that could develop like we have now, we'll talk about that here in a minute, of what to expect, this is a very interesting piece to the puzzle. And now with things starting to get going across the Atlantic Basin, we told you it was only going to be a matter of time, and now things are really starting to take off here, and we'll show that here in a minute. The upper ocean heat content, this is valid as or updated as of this morning, but this shows a fairly significant picture here across the tropical Atlantic. Again, for reference, these yellows and oranges and reds and greens basically is the upper third of the scale, and especially out here in the Caribbean, near Jamaica, Hispaniola, the Bahamas, in through and just east of Belize, the Gulf of Mexico. These sea surface or these upper ocean heat content values are fairly significantly high in the upper part of the scale. And basically what this is, imagine you kind of take a boat maybe 20, 30 miles offshore, away from the shelf waters, right? Maybe let's just go 100 miles offshore. You go down a depth, right? You go down, let's just say 100 meters, right? Well, you would typically expect the water to get colder. Well, in this case, the water's actually staying about the same or just a tad bit warmer than it is at the surface. So it's staying right about the same or just a tad bit warmer. And this helps to fuel hurricanes and tropical cyclones because they like to upwell water. When they upwell this water out here in the Caribbean, they're going to upwell warmer and warmer water, at least the same as it is at the surface. So my point in this is that we have a fairly significant amount of upper ocean heat content for these tropical cyclones to work within in the main development region out here, basically now stretching near the Cabo Verde Islands. Everywhere I'm highlighting here in red has a fairly significant amount of upper ocean heat content, and especially out in here across the deep tropical Atlantic out here into portions of the Florida Straits, everywhere over here, especially in the Caribbean, these numbers are particularly high. Now, what's going on out there? Well, we'll talk about what's going on in the Atlantic in a minute. in the eastern Pacific Basin, we have two tropical depressions. We have Tropical Depression 7, which is located right here, and Tropical Depression 8, which is located right here. This is expected to become a tropical storm within the next 12 hours and then become a hurricane over the next about day or so, really. Is expected to become a hurricane roughly by 60 hours from now, and this could have implications for Hawaii. Again, right now there's no concern for the Hawaiian Islands at this moment. However, the model guidance is bringing this fairly close as it makes a northwesterly turn over the next several days or so to make a more northwesterly turn. And this could get dangerously close to the Hawaiian Islands. So everybody who is watching either in Hawaii or knows anyone in Hawaii needs to be watching the progress of Tropical Depression 8 pretty closely. Again, this is a tropical depression right now, expected to become a hurricane over the next several days or so as this generally moves towards the west-northwest. Well, right now it's going to make a more southwesterly turn and then towards the west and then west-northwest and then north-northwest. So we'll be watching this over the next several days or so to see how this persists, but no significant land concerns at this time for anyone in the eastern Pacific. Now, the Atlantic Basin got quite busy since yesterday. We have 3 areas to talk about, so we'll go over all 3 areas. First of all, starting with the disturbance 1, we have a tropical disturbance that is located in between the Florida Straits and Cuba right now in the Bahamas. This will be moving off towards the northwest here over the next several days or so, emerging into the Gulf of Mexico by tomorrow. This disturbance has a fairly favorable shot in the Gulf of Mexico where water temperatures are fairly warm, and we'll talk about that here in a minute. But water temperatures are fairly warm in this part of the world right now, and this has a shot for tropical cyclone formation. The mid-level relative humidity is going to be pretty decent. We'll talk about that here. But again, the shear is expected to be lower, so this area is going to be a more favorable area for tropical cyclone development. Now, for Tropical Disturbance 2, this area just formed overnight, basically. A low-pressure center has formed off the coast of Texas and is expected to move inland either later tonight or very early tomorrow morning, only with a 20% chance of development over the next 48 hours. But this has now been tagged Invest 90L by the National Hurricane Center. We'll get to what stole 99's position here in a minute. But this has now been tagged Invest 90L and is expected to move inland overnight tonight or tomorrow into portions of the Texas coastline here. This will bring some heavy rainfall to portions of the Louisiana coastline and Texas coastlines over the next 12, 24, and 48 hours or so as this moves gradually inland, but this should not develop much more than that. Now, in the tropical Atlantic, in the main development region, we have Invest 99L with a 20% chance over the next 5 days. This is a disturbance that did get tagged this morning with 99L and has looked increasingly better in organization during the day today. This will eventually meet its demise out here in the tropical Atlantic as dry air and wind shear will obviously kill the system as expected for July systems. So what's really going on out there? Well, this is the tropical Pacific first and foremost. Again, this is Tropical Depression 8E over here. Our other tropical depression over here, not really doing much. Again, this is expected to kind of drift around over the next few days or so, not expected to do much. This could become a hurricane over the next several days and pose a threat for Hawaii, but no significant land concerns at the moment. We are watching another combination of showers and thunderstorms out here across the intertropical convergence zone of the Pacific, but no disturbance tagged on that as of right now. In the Atlantic Basin, we are watching Invest 90L, which is located right about here. This has become increasingly better organized during the day today and poses a rainfall threat for Louisiana and Texas here over the next 48 hours or so. This is what will be Invest 91L here, situated over the Florida Straits in the Bahamas, just north of Cuba. It passed over Hispaniola last night and is now situated in between the Florida Straits and Bahamas. The hurricane hunters are tagged into a reconnaissance mission into this system tomorrow if necessary, as this will eventually be in the Gulf of Mexico in the Florida Straits by tomorrow afternoon. Again, this has only a 20% chance of the next 5 days or so, but this area is going to be relatively moist in a low shear environment and has fairly significant upper ocean heat content values along with the water temperatures in that area. And then we get to Invest 99L. Now, Invest 99L, it's very hard to see, but it is situated right about here in the tropical Atlantic, stretched in within the intertropical convergence zone, which runs roughly about right here. Dry, stable, mid-level air to the north of this is going to be the main inhibitor. However, there is some factors that might help development in the short term, and we'll talk about that here in just a minute. This is taking a look here from tropicaltidbits.com at Invest 90L. Again, we have a situated center that is positioned somewhere roughly in about here. If we can stop that, there we go. So our center of circulation is actually a little bit displaced from the other convection that's kind of situated through here. But this is kind of a disturbance, a disturbed area that's actually getting convergence from the continental United States and also getting some convergence from the ocean surfaces here. This is causing some surface fluxes in this general vicinity, helping to cause some showers and thunderstorms to erupt closer to where our center of circulation is. And if we take a look at that here on the radar imagery from Houston here, again, you notice a very disorganized area of kind of low pressure, not really generally that organized. Again, this area has been waxing and waning with showers and thunderstorms over the last few hours or so. The better concentrated area right now is well to the east of the system, to the east of Lake Charles, Louisiana. This area right over here has kind of been pumping in energy and moisture into the Louisiana coastline here over the last several hours or so, and this is likely to persist into tonight, bringing the potential for some isolated flooding rainfall amounts, certainly getting under any of those heavier rain pockets. Otherwise than that, showers and some isolated thunderstorms for portions of the Texas area here along the Texas coastline as well. This is not expected to significantly develop over the next several days or so. If we take a look here at the broader the water vapor satellite imagery here going over Invest 90L, again, we have a situated area here over the continental United States. This kind of area is a little bit of a stretched out frontal genesis zone. This is basically leftover remnants of a frontal boundary that's kind of been positioned through here. You kind of notice the change in the air mass. Thunderstorms kind of riding up the northern spine of it with some drier air along the eastern side of this, and that is also kind of being wrapped around into the center. You notice that we have a lot of dry, stable, mid-level air in the atmosphere across continental Texas here, and what that is helping to do is obviously a low-pressure system like that. It draws air in counterclockwise, and what that's helping to do is draw in some of this drier, stable continental air mass into where our presumed center of circulation is. This is helping to cause not a lot of showers and thunderstorms to erupt near the center of circulation. But in the meantime, you notice some almost transverse banding and outflow that's trying to develop along here in Louisiana with the system. This is a sign that we have a fairly healthy outflow pattern with this, but this is not going to help much with development because this really only has another 6 to 12 hours over water to really get going. Of course, this could still, try to develop in the short term, but we're not expecting anything significant. But what you do notice is a fairly large area of moisture situated over Louisiana, and this is going to be kind of pumping in energy into Louisiana over the next several hours or so, really throughout the next 48 hours or so. This is going to help to promote some isolated heavier rainfall totals out here in Louisiana and even the Texas coastlines out here, which could lead to some isolated flooding in spots. But again, we're not going to be seeing something like Harvey or Imelda. I got a couple questions about that yesterday over on Twitter, and if you guys don't follow me, make sure you guys do. I'll link that in the description down below to see the latest in-depth analysis on these tropical cyclones. But I got a couple questions yesterday kind of asking about that. This will not be a Harvey. This will not be an Imelda. This is just a simple disturbance that is trying to organize within the fairly warm waters down here, but is going to run out of time. However, some flooding rains is certainly going to be a potential, and some gusty winds, maybe upwards of 40 or 50 miles an hour, and certainly some of the higher and stronger thunderstorms that do end up developing and kind of rotating inwards. But again, you're not really going to see a lot of significant concerns, but heavy rainfall is a concern, and gusty winds is certainly a concern. You do not want to be really caught outside in a quick thunderstorm that produces maybe 50-mile-per-hour winds. really no different from a summertime thunderstorm. You can easily get those anywhere. And if we take a look here at the GFS, this is basically the analysis time as of 7 o'clock this morning. Taking a look here at the 700 to 400 millibar layer of the atmosphere and the relative humidity. Basically, the darker greens are your higher relative humidity, your moister air, and your browns are the drier, more stable air mass. So where's our center of circulation? Well, roughly our center is located in about here. Again, you can barely notice it in the upper levels. We don't really have a fairly well-established rooted storm. Again, this is a fairly shallow system, so it's not showing up here at the higher altitudes, but our system is reasonably inferred to be about here. And again, what you're looking at here is this kind of the moisture fire hose, if you will, that's kind of stretched in from Louisiana to the eastern Texas coastline here into Louisiana. But you have a lot of drier, stable mid-level air right now that's kind of positioned over top of the system. And if we take a look here at a relative sounding from the GFS forecast from tropicaltidbits.com, this is the analysis time as well. Again, you do have a fairly well organized surface profile all the way up to the mid-levels of the atmosphere. Again, what you're looking at here is the green, you're looking at your dew point, and the red right here, this is a skew-T map, by the way. Your red is your temperature profile, and this goes on with height all the way up to about the 100 millibar layer, and it starts here at about 1,000 millibars, or roughly your sea level pressure. And you notice what we have here, though. Our inferred ascending with height is actually capped here because what we have is a relatively warmer air mass that is warmer than the surrounding environment. And so you end up getting a little bit here of capping inversion, so you don't have as much of an ascending force in that. You also notice here that we have, we do have some instability, certainly. We have roughly at the surface over about 2,000 Cape, but mid-level instability is only sitting at about 1,000. Now, that is certainly more than enough. That is enough instability in the atmosphere. We do not have a really well-established curved hodograph, though. So this is one thing kind of going against development. Again, we don't have a fairly well-organized boundary layer orientation as well. But the precipitable water amounts are over about 2.14 inches. That's basically how much rain you could squeeze out of a thunderstorm. If it just sat over that area over about an hour or so, you would get 2.14 inches of rain, so a little less than 2.25. But again, that's still a fairly significant amount. So if you do get any showers and thunderstorms that do end up kind of developing and forming over your area, that could still produce, a quick, 1 to 2, maybe even 3 inches of rain with any rotating bands. But again, development in this in the short term is going to be fairly limited. Again, it only really has about another 6 to 12 hours over water before this eventually moves inland. Now, taking a look here at Invest 99L. So 99L has been looking fairly interesting here over the last several hours. We'll start here at the very beginning of this here at about 13:05 Zulu time, or this is about 8:05 a.m. Eastern time. That's what 13:05 Zulu time is. So this is Invest 90L here at about 8 o'clock this morning, and again, you notice the fairly convective anemic structure to this. Again, not a lot of convective structure to it. We had a couple bands that tried to form earlier this morning, and our inferred center of circulation about this time would be right here. You notice these arc clouds in here, very indicative of that dry mid-level air in the atmosphere. Now, if we run that forward, we run that forward to about 17:15 Zulu time, or roughly, I believe that equivalates to about 1-ish, that equivalates roughly to about 1-ish o'clock. We'll run that to 17:15 Zulu, and you notice the difference between there. Again, from there all the way to here, that looks a little bit better, and in fact it has. We've seen a little bit more in the way of a banding-ish structure to this. Now again, our center of circulation is still fairly well exposed, but we have a fairly decent banding structure. And if we run that out to the current time now, you notice there is more showers and thunderstorms that are developing near the center of circulation. But if you take a look here at the water vapor satellite imagery, this is where things get fairly complicated. we see this fairly dry, stable air mass to the north. That's these darker colors in the infrared satellite loop here. But you also notice that within 99L's pocket, we do have an area of relatively moisture air in the atmosphere surrounded by this drier mid-level air to its north. Now, obviously, a cyclone is a counterclockwise circulation. So what this would infer is this is dry, stable air mass would end up getting wrapped around and entrained into the center of circulation. However, we have seen something interesting. The system has actually moved a little bit due south today, and this means that it has a slightly better chance of staying within the intertropical convergence zone for a longer period of time. This would help to enhance the potential for 99L to gain more organization. And in fact, if we switch it real quick here to the visible to the IR satellite loop, you notice that we have more showers and thunderstorms developing. Now this is fairly shallow convection. This is not fairly deep convection at all, but this is fairly shallow. But we still see these showers and thunderstorms that are trying to pop up and get going, but they are quickly collapsing because of this dry air to the north of the system right now. But if this can hold on for at least another 12 to 24 hours or so and produce persistent deep convection, this may help to actually tighten the circulation up a little bit more. This might also help to produce its own environment. And if we switch it here to the GFS forecast, this is the analysis time, and we'll bump that up to 6 hours. This is basically at 2 o'clock this afternoon, so roughly about 45 minutes ago. This area right now is in a fairly moist area according to the GFS. And if we kind of switch that over here on the GFS for the same time frame here at about the 2 o'clock Eastern time, again, this is in a fairly moist profile, better than 90L in fact. And again, we do have a little bit of a capping inversion, but it is way less. We do have some instability, but you notice our mid-level instability of only 168, that is fairly low. And again, we have a fairly moist profile though all the way up into the atmosphere. So the PWAT values are at about 2.17 inches. We do have a little bit more favorable of a hodograph for tropical cyclones. Again, a little bit more of a curved hodograph, if you will, especially up there in the mid-levels. So we have this area of favorability for 99L to eventually get going. And if, again, we switch that to the visible high res here, you notice how it's really trying to go. We're approaching sundown out here in the main development region. You kind of notice how it's been kind of dampening out, or what we call kind of this color fade, and this is going to continue over the next couple of hours as the sun continues to set out here in the MDR. Regardless, the system will have tonight to work within a more favorable environment. If we take a look at that here on the 850 millibar vorticity, this is from 15 Zulu time. This is a fairly substantial area of vorticity in the atmosphere at about the 850 or 5,000 foot level in the atmosphere. Fairly decent area about south of 10 north, so this is in a fairly favorable area sea surface temperature wise. Again, this dry stable mid-level air though is going to be certainly the biggest problem. This is also taking a look here at Invest 90L, which also has a fairly substantial area of vorticity. So we will be watching this over the next few hours or so to see how this persists. And again, we will be taking a look at everything again. And if you guys do want to go follow me on Twitter, make sure to go do so. I will be giving a lot more updates on everything going on there. And of course, be talking about this tomorrow as well. A quick look here at the European ECMWF 850 millibar vorticity kind of model guidance here for the next little bit. Again, this is actually 90L, or 99L, which is positioned right through here. The European is really trying to kind of develop this at least in the next 24 to 36 hours or so before finally weakening out. We also notice here this is what soon will probably be Invest 91L, and then eventually kind of nothing really going on throughout the next 216 hours. But if we take a real quick look here at the MSLP normal anomaly here, again, we have noticed a fairly substantial area of more robust waves, and we have seen an area of constantly lower pressure out here in the deep tropics. So The time is coming, people. And if you haven't taken this hurricane season seriously yet, it's time to do so now. The time is coming, and we all got to do our part to be prepared. I can only do so much. You guys got to do the rest of the work and be prepared on this. All right? Well, that's going to be it for me today. Of course, if anything significant happens, I'll be back. But again, otherwise than that, I will be back likely with another video discussion tomorrow. Hope you all have a great rest of your afternoon and evening. Of course, go follow me on Twitter because I will be doing consistent updates on there. Have a great rest of your afternoon and evening. I am Michael Romali, and I'll see you guys back here then tomorrow with another Hurricane Season 2020 update, forecast, and discussion.